This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Rada back with episode 92 of A Geek Leader podcast, and today on the show I've got A.J. Jacobs. He's one of my favorite authors. I first heard about A.J. Jacobs when he had written an article that was reprinted in Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, about how he outsourced his life. And I thought it was really super fascinating because he outsourced things like arguing with his wife, getting a parking spot. It was just crazy to think about all the different things that you could outsource at the time. So I thought, well, let me find out more about this guy. So I did some research and started reading some of his other books, and he has a book where he lived biblically for a year, where he followed all the rules of the Bible. It's kind of humorous, but also insightful, the things that he took away from it, that he learned from it. There was a book about living healthy, Drop Dead Healthy, where he talked about all the different things that you're supposed to do, like putting on sunscreen every so often and walking and standing, and it was just a fascinating book. And he's got his newest book, which is about gratitude. It's kind of one of those things that I've been focusing a lot about, is trying to be more grateful for all those things around me. And when I found out that he had written a book called Thanks 1,000, where he tried to thank 1,000 people who played a part in creating his cup of coffee in the morning, I wanted to get him on the show and talk about it, and talk about ways that we can use gratitude to help us be better leaders and just better people and happier people in general. So with all that being said, give it up for A.J. Jacobs. AJ, to get started, I first heard about your writing, or read about your writing, in Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, 8 or 9 years ago. And in there, you had an article about how you outsourced a good portion of your life. And I thought that was super fascinating. So I did some more digging around, and I saw that you've done a lot of other experiments that are just super interesting. And I wanted to figure out how you got started out kind of being a guinea pig and doing some of these things.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. And yeah, I loved doing that article. That article was for Esquire, and it was... the idea was I hired a team of people in Bangalore, India, to do everything for me. And they answered my phone and answered my email, but they also argued with my wife for me, and they read bedtime stories to my son. So it was sort of taking outsourcing to its most extreme level. And it was funny because Tim Ferriss called me, and he basically outsourced the writing of his chapter on outsourcing to me. He just reprinted my article. And I'm a big fan of Tim's, and he just had me on his podcast. So delighted. And we do a similar thing. He's much more successful than I am at selling the books. But we both try to experiment with our lives. And yeah, I've done it for many, many years now. The first book I wrote was about reading the Encyclopedia Britannica from A to Z in my quest to learn everything in the world. And since then, I've done a whole bunch of other ones.
I was actually talking to my daughter, she's 8, probably a month or two ago, about encyclopedias, because she didn't quite get what an encyclopedia was. And I tried to explain it to her, and she's like, so it's like Siri in a book.
That's a good description. I like it.
Yeah,
well, my kids know Wikipedia, but and they're like, why don't you read Wikipedia? And I was like, well, Wikipedia, the amount that it grows every day is more than 24 hours of reading per day. So I would have to live forever.
And your most recent book, I really like because for two reasons. One, I'm addicted to coffee, probably more so than any other person alive. And number two is I've been trying to get on this gratitude kick for probably the last year or so, where I've been encouraging my kids to think about things in a different way and to be grateful for things. And I'm also been trying to do the same, like with myself, to think about what all goes into the things that we have, and how lucky we are to live in America in a time where we have all that we do when it comes to medicines and food that's just right here. We don't have to go and farm or hunt or anything like that. And this book kind of took that to the next level. How did you think about or get into the idea of writing about gratitude?
Well, I had been interested in gratitude for quite some time. I had read all of the studies about how good it is for you, both physically and mentally, it actually helps you recover more quick. I have a little cold right now, actually, so I've got to ramp up my gratitude to try and get this cold out. Oh God, you know what that is? That's the shoot. That was the timer to say that you might be calling. All right. So thank you, timer. That was helpful. So yeah, I read all about how important gratitude is for your health and happiness and staving off depression. So I tried to start this gratitude ritual where I would say a prayer of thanksgiving before dinner. But the trick is I'm not very religious. So instead of thanking God, I decided I would just name some of the people who helped get my meal, make it a reality. So I'd say, I'd like to thank the farmer who grew the tomatoes and the cashier at the grocery who sold me the tomatoes. And my son, who was 10 at the time, pointed out that this was okay, but also kind of lame because these people weren't in the apartment. He's like, if you really cared, you should go and thank them in person. And that's when the light bulb went off. I'm like, that is an interesting project. What if I went around the world and tried to thank every single person for the food or drink that's in front of me? And that's what I did. I chose coffee because, like you, I'm a fan. And I went around and I thanked over 1,000 people who helped make my coffee. So I went wide, because I realized that it does take more than 1,000 people because you've got the barista, of course. I went to South America and I thanked the farmer who grew the beans. But there's so many other people. There's the logo designer, the truck driver, the person who painted the yellow lines in the highway so the truck wouldn't veer into oncoming traffic. I mean, you can just go on and on. It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. And you realize that there are so many people we take for granted in every little thing that we do and have around us today.
So when you're going about this journey, what were the reactions that you got? Did some people were they happy? Were they annoyed? Were they thinking you were crazy?
Yeah, it's all three. I thank some people in person, some by phone, and some by email. And yeah, there was a range. There was a percentage who were like, what's going on here? Is this a pyramid scheme? Are you trying to sell me something? Like, what scam is this? But the majority were actually quite receptive and happy. I remember I called the woman who did pest control for the warehouse where the coffee beans are stored. And I called her and I said, I know this is a little strange, but I want to thank you for keeping the insects out of my coffee. And she said, well, that is strange, but you know what? I thank you. I don't get a lot of appreciation for keeping the insects out of the coffee. So, she said it made her day, which in turn made my day, because I think that's the gratitude at its best. It's this two-way street. It's, it increases the happiness level of both parties. So those were the ideal when you got, and that was the majority. And I even got some free stuff. I didn't go into it trying to get free stuff, but I remember I thanked I think it was Glad garbage bags because they made the garbage bags at the coffee shop where I go, and they sent me dozens of dollars of Glad garbage paraphernalia that I felt I had to donate it. I was a little sleazy to be making money off my gratitude project, getting free stuff. But it was a wild experience.
Yeah. So as you started going down this path, and how did you know where to stop? Because like you said, you think the people that made the trash bags at at the place where you buy coffee, how do you know how far is too far for a project like this?
Well, like you say, I could have done this for the next 50 years of my life, because I really do. If you take it seriously, you will see that everything is connected. The coffee cup, there had to be lumberjacks who cut down the trees, and there had to be people who made the hard hats for the lumberjacks. So I was getting overwhelmed, and I find in any project that it's good to have a set goal. So in the middle of the project, I said to myself, oh, you know what, 1,000. I got to cut it off at 1,000. And as a writer, and I think, any business, if you have a set goal, it's going to make life so much easier. All of my projects have a very either set time period, like I'm going to do this for a year, or a very strict structure. I once did where I tried to throw the biggest family reunion in history, so there was like a very clear goal that's what I was going to end up with, and I find that super helpful.
So what was the worst reaction you got, or the most unexpected reaction?
Well, it mostly just people saying, what are you trying to sell me? It's like, I swear, I'm not trying to sell you anything. One thing I've done that's been interesting, that's gotten some weird reactions. I won't say they're bad, but to market the book, I decided I was going to write 1,000 thank you notes to readers. So I announced this on my website and social media, and the reaction has been lovely, but also at times strange, because people are requesting things. One requested that I draw a picture of a dog eating a taco. I'm not an artist, so I don't know what that was about. But I will say, this sort of mini experiment of writing 1,000 thank you notes has been very illuminating. I mean, first of all, from a purely business perspective, it is, there are studies that show when you write a handwritten note, not just an email, but an actual handwritten note to customers, like you get twice the retention rate of those customers. I mean, there's something about the physical that people love. So I have, I'm still on letter like number 622, so it's, in one sense, it's a huge pain in my butt, but in another sense, it has been very fulfilling.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a scarcity thing, because you're used to getting emails that say thank you and getting responses like that, but to get something physical that's handwritten, that someone took time and energy, right, that they're not going to get back into making that for you, it makes it feel more valuable. Oh yeah, and actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I just had a friend of mine who has a podcast. He was talking about booking guests, and he says he writes handwritten letters, and the response has been so much better than if he tries to email them or email their publicist. Oh yeah, I bet that will work a whole lot better, because it's like, wow, this person took the time to actually look up my address and to write a letter, versus shooting off a LinkedIn request the way I do a lot of them. Exactly. Yeah. Right. I mean, you might get some people who are alarmed, so you get like the 20% who are like, what the hell? But I think overall, very effective. Yeah, so I know in some of your other books, I've heard you talk about how you've taken something out of it, like the living biblically for you. It's kind of where the gratitude was one of the big positives you took away from it. What is something you took away from telling people thank you face to face that was maybe unexpected or kind of a surprise to you? Well, several things. I mean, one that you just brought up was interesting, the face to face. Because the first person I thanked was the barista at my local coffee shop. And she said, I asked her, what's it like to be a barista? First of all, it's a hard job, she says, because you're meeting people in a very dangerous state, which is pre-caffeination. So not everyone's happy. And by the way, she would never do this, but I have heard if you are rude to your barista, some of them will give you secretly decaf coffee. So just, that's a selfish reason to be nice to your barista. But she said the worst was when people would just not even look up from their phones, just push their credit card toward her, treat her like a vending machine. And so it inspired me.
just to look in people's eyes for 2 seconds. I'm not that busy that I can't look up from my phone for 2 seconds and, and make that human contact. And I think that she said that it made all the difference to her when people do that. And I think it's good for me, just on a selfish level. We are wired for human contact. And when we force ourselves to look people in the eyes, that is going to make you happier.
No, I think you're absolutely right. There's something about that human connection of looking at someone and seeing their eyes. It's almost like you see into them a little bit, more so than just seeing that it's just something there.
Right, totally.
So, speaking of everything being connected, I wanted to hit on one of your other books. You mentioned it briefly about the wanting to throw the largest family reunion. Did anywhere during this gratitude project, did you think about how maybe you were connected, or maybe this person was your distant cousin or anything like that? Did that kind of bleed in at all?
Yeah. I mean, it was a very similar theme, and I think it runs through. It's an obsession of mine, this idea that everything is connected, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. And the book you mentioned, that started because I got this email a few years ago, and the guy said, you don't know me, but I'm your 8th cousin. And I thought, again, that this might be a scam. Like, I was like, this guy's going to ask me to wire money to Nigeria. But it turned out he was legit, and he's part of this group who are trying to build they are building the biggest family tree in history. And we're not talking hundreds or thousands of people. This is millions of people, all on the same family tree, all connected by blood or marriage. And all the ideas, eventually, every human on Earth will be in the same family tree. And I loved it because it is like this connection frenzy. So you'll go on one of these sites and you can spend a week down a wormhole just putting in your name and someone else. I looked up, how am I related to Barack Obama? And this is the true link. He is my 5th great aunt's husband's brother's wife's 7th great nephew. So I love that we're so close. And just from a practical level, this has turned out to be, again, a very good way to get in contact with people. It's sort of like LinkedIn, but with a familial twist. So I figured out how I was related to George H.W. Bush, the 41st president. And I wanted to get in touch with him to interview him for my book. And I was able to drop this, that we were 12th cousins 3 times removed. And it actually worked. I got the interview.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to keep that one in my back pocket. That's a good little tip there.
Exactly.
So when you're thanking someone, what is the process that you go by? Is it, because that's kind of one of the hard things for me, is that I don't want to seem creepy and thank someone for too many things, but I also want to make sure that I don't overlook the things and say the obvious, because that's not as sincere. It's not like you thought about it much. Where is it, or what have you figured out going through this process that might help someone be better at saying thank you?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, one interesting study I saw was Wharton, the business school, did a study where they found that people who wrote thank you notes to potential employers, if they varied the phrasing, they would get a bigger response. So instead of just the reflexive thank you, if they said even something like, I'm grateful that you took the time, they got a bigger response back from the interviewer. Which is interesting. So I do try to vary it up. As you say, you don't want to sound too creepy. You gotta try to still sound like, a normal human being. But another, what you said too, I think is important, that it is, you want to be specific. You don't want the same old. So I try to put myself in the position of the person and say, what they go through to get me this. So even something like, when I thank the truck driver, it's like, thank you for sitting in New York City traffic during Christmas time. That must have sucked. But I really appreciate you got me my coffee. So, yeah, if you can think specifically of what they went through, which is not only good for them, but it's good for you to remember how much people have done, and I think it makes you a happier person too, because you're not taking things for granted. You're remembering all that went into something as simple like coffee.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's one of the things I've been trying to do at night was to, right before I go to bed, is to think of at least 3 or 4 things that I'm really deeply thankful for that happened today. That's different, and try not to ever say the same 3 things in a row. I don't want to always say, well, I'm thankful that my daughter got an A, and tomorrow say, I'm thankful my daughter got an A. I want to make sure there's something very specific and very unique, like yesterday. I have a 4-year-old, and he finally mastered a cartwell. And I know that sounds silly and stupid, but just being able to say, I'm really grateful that he was able to figure out to nail this cartwheel yesterday,
Sure.
and to have it.
That's big stuff.
And just something like that I said in my mind, it made me smile, it made me happier. And I'm not sure scientifically how to prove it, but I think that I woke up a little less grumpy because of those thank yous that I say at night.
Yeah, that's nice. I mean, one of the parts of my book that got the biggest response was this, just what you said. I would do this sort of before going to sleep hack, where what I found was to do it alphabetically. So try to go through the alphabet. So start with A, and that could be your daughter got an A, and B could be, the blueberry pancakes that your kids made on Sunday. And I find that gives it structure, and I usually am asleep by G or H.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's a way to, I guess, to get good rest, but also to go through the day and be reflective on all the things that happened, and to put it in a way that forms a
right.
habit.
Yes, exactly. I do think that it doesn't come naturally to us. A lot of positive emotions don't come naturally, including gratitude. I talk in the book about how we have a negative bias, that if you hear 100 compliments and a single insult, then what do you remember? The insult. And I also talk, we've got our 2 sides in our brain, the Larry David side and the Mr. Rogers side. And the Larry David side, from an evolutionary standpoint, is stronger, just because it helped us survive. But it's not a good way to go through life now. So we really have to have these rituals and conscious decisions to be grateful and to do this as a discipline.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that I tend to focus on the negative thing that happened versus the million positive things. I think that's the way you put it in your book. There's hundreds of positive things that happened and things that went right, but you always think about that one thing that messed up your commute.
Yeah, you are human. There are some people, sometimes my wife is like this, who are naturally optimistic, but I think the majority of us are really good at finding the negative. And so it is super helpful just to remember all the positive things, all that went right. You just take a minute of your day, I find, press the elevator button and notice that the elevator came, and you get in and it doesn't crash to the basement and break your collarbone. I mean, there are so many things. Like the fact that this microphone is working, that's unbelievable. How many things had to go right for this microphone to work so that you and I could talk? Yeah,
and I mean, we're several states away. It's amazing that this is actually happening.
Right.
So, what does your family think about you doing these experiments, such as living biblically for a year, or trying to be the healthiest person alive?
Right.
What do people think you're crazy, or is it just kind of oh, it's just AJ doing his thing?
Well, my family is they're very patient, and they get benefits, and there are costs to them. So I remember. When I did the Bible book, I was trying to follow all the rules of the Bible as literally as possible. And in the Old Testament, Leviticus, it talks about that you should not touch a woman during her time of month. And it's even more specific. It says that if a menstruating woman has sat on a chair, then the chair has become impure. So my wife found that offensive, and she sat in every chair in our apartment. And so I had to stand for the year. So she sometimes gets back at me. So there are negatives. But also there's always a takeaway that is positive. I after the Bible, I shaved my beard, but there were many things that I kept, like this idea of gratitude, this idea of trying to not gossip. That was a one that I've taken away. I still gossip a lot, but less, like 40% less than I used to. So there are always, because these experiments and these life experiments would be kind of pointless if I didn't have some positive takeaway that made my life and hopefully my family's life better.
Yeah, that's good. I know during that book, I remember when I read that, you mentioned that you had stoned a guy. What was his reaction to that? Like, what was the thought? Was it funny? Was it kind of just like, you're strange?
He was not happy at all. It was very serious, even though the stones were quite small. I mean, he came up to me. I was in the Central Park in New York, and I was very much into character. So I had on the robe and the sandals and the beard, and he said, "What's going on? Why are you like that?" And I explained, "I'm trying to follow everything in the Bible, from the 10 Commandments to stoning adulterers." And he said, "Well, I'm an adulterer. Are you going to stone me?" And I said, "That'd be awesome." And I took out my handful of stones that I had been carrying around for weeks, and I showed it to him. They were very small, like pebble size, and he grabbed them out of my hand. He was very aggressive, and he threw them at my face. So I thought an eye for an eye is also in the Bible, so maybe I could throw one back at him. So that's how I checked that off the list.
Wow, that's quite a story, that's for sure.
It was. I'm actually very thankful for him, even though he seemed to be a terrible person, because he got a good section for me in the book.
So, I was wondering if you could just tell our audience, or leave our audience with some tips that are some ways that you've seen that gratitude has helped people when it comes to management or leadership or helping someone, maybe have influence over others, or to help people throughout the way that something that you may have seen along your journey going through this gratitude project.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think there is research that we overestimate how awkward thanking people is, and we underestimate how important it is to them. And there's lots of research about how managers really, just appreciating and saying that they appreciate their workers is such a morale booster. And I did an article, I think, for LinkedIn about sort of gratitude in the workplace, and there were some very interesting companies who were adopting it. One travel company had people in the morning. It was a voluntary, but you could go into a room and sort of go around the table and say what you're thankful for. Now, some people might find that, creepy or whatever, but some people it works for. There are other companies that do these. They sort of have in-house apps where you can thank people, make it easier to acknowledge, like someone did you a favor that made your work better, that helped you, and you can give them some sort of badge. And I think one of the companies, like, you actually, if you collect enough, then you get some sort of bonus. So there's that way, almost monetizing gratitude. But I would say, it's such an incredibly powerful tool. I mean, hopefully you're not doing it just for Machiavellian reasons, but it just makes people so much happier in the workplace that I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think happier employees. They work better for you. One of the things that I've noticed when it just comes to leadership and management in general, when your employees want to work for you or want to work with you, they will work harder for you. And
oh yeah,
and it makes you happier. It makes your job a little bit easier, and it makes their life a little bit easier to have a boss that they care about, and they know that you care about them as well.
Right. No, I think that is the. You look at companies like Google where they try to make work as pleasant as possible and have, their multiple free restaurants. And I think that it's a good strategy because the studies show that, happy employees are definitely going to be more productive employees.
Well, I really appreciate having you on, and I hope you feel better. I know you've had a little bit of a cold.
Well, thank you. I am grateful to you for saying that. And, I will kick it since I'm working on my gratitude. That it's good for my immune system.
All right. Well, I'm very thankful to have you on here. I'm thankful for your book. I'm going to link all that up in the show notes. How can people find out more about you and more about Thanks 1,000?
Well, I've got a website, ajjacobs.com, and I'm on all the social media, so feel free to find me there. I'd love to hear from you.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
So that was A.J. Jacobs, and his latest book, Thanks 1,000, is available wherever books are found. I checked out the audiobook on Audible, and it was a great listen. It's actually read in his voice, which is good. I always like when books are read by the author. So definitely check that out. And if you've enjoyed this show and any other shows that we've done, please give me a review in iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast, wherever your podcast player of choice is. And hit me up on Twitter. I'd like to hear from you. My handle is @JohnRauta. Thanks so much.